Welcome to International Trade Minute, Quick Fire Trade News, the essential podcast for today's trade professionals, presented to you by Rydell Law Firm. If you're a seasoned practitioner, this is where you'll find your weekly distilled briefing on the pulse of international commerce and regulation. We bring you the latest legal and trade news, distilled into straightforward, bite-sized updates for busy trade professionals. Sponsored by Rydell Law Firm, this podcast is crafted by expert trade attorneys to keep you ahead of the curve with concise, actionable insights. Perfect for your morning commute or coffee break. Stay informed without the fluff. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and join our professional community on LinkedIn. Today we are exploring the latest in international trade news: U.S.-China chip war, CFIUS enforcement actions, CBP rulings, new U.S. persons controls, and China's new critical mineral export controls. Let's get started. First up, U.S. export controls aimed at limiting Chinese technological advancements are unintentionally harming American toolmakers. These companies are losing market share in China as competitors from Japan and the Netherlands, not subject to the same restrictions, step in. Paul Triolo of Albright Stonebridge Group notes that U.S. chip equipment manufacturers are particularly impacted, having to withdraw personnel from China while foreign competitors continue supplying advanced equipment. This shift is not only boosting international competitors' presence in China, but also threatens the global viability of U.S. toolmakers, who worry about being edged out of the market in the long term. A key concern is that these export controls may offer limited national security benefits while significantly harming U.S. companies. Reduced profits from lost market share mean less funding for crucial research and development, particularly in an innovation-dependent industry. Some U.S. companies question the effectiveness of these policies as China accelerates efforts to develop advanced semiconductor technologies independently. For example, Huawei's Mate 60 Pro Plus smartphone features a 7-nanometer chip, showcasing Chinese progress despite U.S. restrictions. In response, the U.S. government, under congressional pressure, has tightened restrictions further. Despite tightened restrictions, there's debate over their long-term impact. Kevin Xu, a former commerce official, suggests that U.S.-China competition may stabilize, and once the U.S. secures a technological lead, export controls could become less frequent, providing a more predictable business environment. The key takeaway for trade practitioners is to closely monitor policy changes and their effects on market dynamics and technological advancement. Proactive planning is essential to address challenges and seize opportunities. In summary, while U.S. export controls aim to limit China's tech growth, they are also impacting American toolmakers by increasing competition and threatening their long-term prospects. Continuous assessment and strategic planning are crucial to navigating this evolving situation. Up next, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., CFIUS, has made headlines this year with nearly $70 million in penalties, including a significant $60 million fine against T-Mobile for violating a national security agreement tied to its merger with Sprint. T-Mobile was penalized for failing to prevent unauthorized access to sensitive data and not reporting these incidents promptly, which hindered CFIUS's ability to mitigate risks. This case highlights CFIUS's shift towards increased transparency and stricter enforcement. Previously seen as secretive, CFIUS has become more open and assertive, underscored by last year's publication of enforcement guidelines. Paul Rosen from the Treasury Department emphasized that the renewed focus on enforcement ensures companies face consequences if they fail to meet national security obligations. CFIUS has been active this year, imposing significant fines beyond just T-Mobile. One case involved a $1.25 million penalty for a party submitting a voluntary notice with 5 material misstatements, including forged documents, leading CFIUS to reject the filing and abandon the transaction. Another company was fined $8.5 million for breaching its national security agreement by removing independent directors and weakening compliance oversight. These actions are part of CFIUS's broader strategy to deter noncompliance and enforce adherence to national security agreements. The committee has issued penalties for various violations, including failing to maintain accurate foreign ownership statements and not restricting access to protected data. For first-time or minor violations, a don't letter may be issued instead of a penalty, but companies may still face further scrutiny and additional information requests. CFIUS is expanding its focus on non-notified transactions, deals that should have been disclosed but weren't. Since 2020, the committee has increased its resources to screen thousands of transactions annually and encourages companies to report potential violations. For law firms and businesses, this trend toward stricter enforcement means that compliance programs must be robust and up to date. Trade practitioners should stay informed about evolving CFIUS guidelines, educate teams on compliance, and regularly audit practices to meet high standards. Compliance is not just a regulatory requirement, but a key element of risk management and strategic planning. Moving on to our next piece, Customs and Border Protection, CBP, recently ruled that for imported prescription drugs like omeprazole, the ultimate purchasers are the consumers, not the retail pharmacies that dispense them. This decision mandates that the country of origin must be clearly stated on the packaging reaching the end consumer, even if a pharmacy like CVS repackages the medication. The ruling originated from a 2017 complaint by a consumer who argued that they should know the country of origin of their medication. Sandoz, a division of Novartis, argued that the pharmacy, as the repackager, should be considered the ultimate purchaser, but CBP disagreed. CBP distinguished between retail pharmacies and hospitals, concluding that pharmacies, which repackage drugs for resale, require different labeling practices. CBP has clarified that repackaging does not constitute a substantial transformation for country of origin purposes, meaning the labeling responsibility remains with the manufacturer, not the pharmacy. As a result, consumers will now see the country of origin directly on their prescription drug packaging. This ruling emphasizes that country of origin can significantly influence consumer decisions, and simply listing it on a product information sheet is insufficient. Pharmaceutical companies and retail pharmacies must review their packaging and labeling practices to ensure compliance with this CBP regulation, promoting transparency and aiding informed consumer choices. In conclusion, while this ruling will necessitate some operational changes, it underscores the importance of transparency in the pharmaceutical supply chain, aligning it closer with consumer interests. For trade practitioners, it's crucial to keep an eye on these developments and ensure that all labeling practices are up to date and compliant with the latest CBP regulations. In the next segment, the Bureau of Industry and Security, BIS, and the Directorate of Defense Trade Controls, DDTC, have introduced new export controls on U.S. persons' activities, requiring companies to overhaul their compliance programs. These regulations aim to restrict U.S. support for foreign military intelligence and security end users, complicating the export control landscape. The rules significantly expand military end use and military end user controls to include all items under the Export Administration Regulations, EAR, even everyday items like a U.S. origin toothbrush, if destined for military end users in countries like China. Companies must enhance compliance training, end user certifications, and due diligence to meet these new standards. The significance here lies in the broadened scope of what constitutes a military end user or military support end user. Items not explicitly listed on any control lists, which many multinational corporations deal with regularly, are now under tighter scrutiny. This means businesses must rigorously vet not only their suppliers and customers, but also the end users of their products. Even indirect support of a military end user could necessitate obtaining a license. For instance, under the new rules, items designated as EAR 99 would now fall under military end user restrictions if they are shipped to a covered country or entity. The compliance facet here is critical. Businesses must enhance their screening processes to ensure they do not inadvertently breach these expanded regulations. The proposed rules require firms to ensure their operations, including those of their foreign subsidiaries and partners, comply with the new controls. A key change is the introduction of controls over military support end users, with no clear definition of support, adding compliance complexity. Companies must broadly interpret what might constitute support to avoid violations. Export license requirements now apply if there's knowledge that an item, even if not strictly controlled, is intended for a military support end user, stressing the need for meticulous due diligence. For instance, re-exporting a U.S. origin product from France to a known military end user in China would now require a license. The proposed rules also revise definitions for defense services under ITAR, raising questions about how activities like repairs on military vehicles are classified. Given these complex changes, companies should promptly update their compliance programs, focusing on supply chain integrity, internal processes, and training. Ensure compliance teams understand the new requirements and that due diligence processes are robust. Action item. Trade professionals should start by conducting a comprehensive compliance audit to identify areas affected by the new BIS and DDTC controls. Enhance training programs for compliance teams and relevant staff to navigate the new rules effectively. Strengthen due diligence processes to meet the broad definitions and extensive requirements of the updated export controls, ensuring your organization remains compliant and minimizes risk. For our last article, China has announced new export controls on crucial minerals, including antimony, effective September 15th. These minerals are vital for batteries, weaponry, and other industrial applications. Exports will now require a license, reflecting their national security importance. This move follows recent Chinese restrictions on drones and minerals like gallium and germanium, signaling China's strategic control over these resources. For trade professionals, this introduces immediate challenges. It's crucial to assess your supply chain to identify dependencies on these controlled minerals and understand their role in your products and processes. Next, consider exploring alternative sourcing options to mitigate risks from these new controls. Building relationships with suppliers in unaffected regions can help maintain supply chain stability. Ensure your compliance strategies are current and robust, working closely with legal teams to navigate the evolving landscape. This may involve obtaining export licenses or finding new compliant suppliers. Assess your supply chain for dependencies on the affected minerals, explore alternative sources, and update your compliance strategies. Evaluate the potential impact on your industry and take proactive steps to safeguard operations. Thanks for tuning in to International Trade Minute, quick-fire trade news. We hope you found today's episode insightful and useful for your practice. Remember, our podcast is brought to you by Rydell Law Firm, your trusted partner in navigating international trade law. Don't miss our next episode. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Stay connected and continue the conversation with us on LinkedIn. Until next time, stay informed and stay ahead.